أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي.
The author gives you some sort of concession and he states that you can either pay zakah every single year on it, add it in your zakah calculation, or you can wait until you get the money from Brother Sulaiman, but you need to pay up 10 years of zakah on that wealth for as long as it was in the hands of Brother Sulaiman. It is as if you took this 10,000 pounds and you gave it to Sulaiman and you said to Sulaiman, you know what, keep this money for me as safekeeping. That's how these scholars looked at it. They said that this money is in his hands. He's like your wakil, he's like your agent, because you have the ability to access that money. You have the ability to get back that money. It is an asset. So either you pay zakah on it every single year, fantastic. Or once you receive it, then you pay zakah on all of those years that it was with brother Sulaiman. On the other hand, if the missing property is irretrievable, you don't have any hope in getting this money back from Brother Sulaiman, like a debt owed by a bankrupt or a claim that is denied, he says, no, I don't owe you any money, and you don't really have any proof to prove this in the courts. And property that has been usurped and gone astray, all this wealth was stolen from you, you don't know where it is, you don't have any hope in finding it, there is no zakah due upon it at all. Jayyid. So the author states, if this person is not paying you, if this person is beating around the bush, if you lost the wealth, you don't know where it is, then there is no zakah every single year. And let's say if for some, walhamdulillah, some reason, you do get the money back. Brother Sulaiman, he's made tawbah and he's given you the money back, walhamdulillah, you add it in to your normal zakah calculation. If, for example, you calculate your zakah in Ramadan and Brother Sulaiman has brought this money back to you after 10 years, 3 days before your zakah calculation, then you add it in, and 3 days later, if you have anything left from it, then you add it in your normal zakah calculation. It follows your normal cycle, walhamdulillah. So we state, with regards to this matter that the author has mentioned, monies owed to you, is there zakah on monies owed to you? According to the Hanbali madhab, the answer is yes, and they divide it into two categories: monies which you expect to get and monies which you don't expect to get. Monies which you expect to get, then you need to pay zakat on it every single year, that's one option. Or once you receive it, you need to pay zakah for all of those years which passed. It comes to the same thing, but there's a little bit more ease in the second opinion, that once you receive it, you pay zakah for all of the years, walhamdulillah. And the other classification was monies which you don't really expect to get. Monies that you don't really expect to get. You find some scholars stating, no matter what, the money is with Sulaiman, he has that wealth, he's still alive, you need to pay zakat on that money. That opinion rather very, very stern. You have another opinion that once you receive the money, you pay zakah for 1 year on it. Once you receive the money, if you receive the money, you don't really know whether you would receive it, but if you do receive the money, then you pay zakat. As soon as you receive it, you pay zakat for 1 year on that wealth. And that's the opinion of Imam Malik rahimahullah. And the third opinion, which is the opinion of the madhab, the Hanbali madhab, is that there is no zakat on it, and you add it in your normal cycle, and when the time comes, then you would pay zakat on it. And that opinion is the strongest opinion, inshaAllah, and that opinion is also the opinion of the Hanafi madhab. It might not be the safest opinion. Safest opinion might be to pay zakat every year. Safer opinion would be to pay zakat at least one time, walhamdulillah. But the obligation is, once you receive it, you add it to your normal cycle. When the time of zakat comes, then you pay zakat on it. This was if you had no hope in receiving this money. The author then states, the rule applied to bridal dower is the same as the rule applied to debt. And we will read the Arabic. من كان له دين على مليء أو مال يمكنه خصاله كالمجحود الذي له بينة والمغصوب الذي يتمكن من أخذه فعليه زكاته إذا قبضه لما مضى وإن كان متعذرا كالدين على مفلس أو على جاحد ولا بينة والمغصوب والضال الذي لا يرجى وجوده فلا زكاة فيه وحكم الصداق حكم الدين. And the rule with regards to a female who is owed by her husband her dower, this mahar, he has not yet paid it to her, the author states, it follows the ruling of a debt. If the husband has the ability to pay it, then every year, if it is with him for 5 years, then every year she needs to pay zakat on that wealth. She either has one of two options. She pays zakat every single year, or once she receives that 10,000 pounds from her husband after 5 years, she pays zakat for those 5 years which had passed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 years, she takes out the money and she pays for every single one of those years 2.5%, 2.5%. That's the opinion of the author. And it would be similar that if the husband is a person who is mumatil, he doesn't really have the wealth, he doesn't really have the money, he's playing around, he's not really giving her the money, he's beating around the bush, then once she receives it, similar three opinions which we meant previously, that the severest of the opinions is she needs to pay zakat for every single year, similar to as if her husband had the wealth. Very, very stern opinion. Second opinion, as soon as she receives the money in her hand, even though her date for zakat is still months away, as soon as she receives the money in her hand, the Maliki opinion, she pays zakat over this wealth, which equals 1 year. 2.5% on it one time, she gives it to the poor, walhamdulillah, and it's done. And the third opinion, and the opinion of the madhab and the Hanafi scholars, is that her husband was a person who was beating around the bush, not really paying her. She didn't really expect to get that money. Eventually, once she gets it, she adds it to her normal zakah cycle, and there's nothing for her to pay for the previous years, nothing for her to pay right now today. She adds it into her cycle. When the date of zakah comes for her, then inshallah she will pay zakat on it. The author then states, وَمَنْ كَانَ عَلَيْهِ دَيْنٌ يَسْتَغْرِقْ النِّصَابَ الَّذِي مَعَهُ أَوْ يَنْقُصَهُ فَلَا زَكَاةَ فِيهِ. And if someone owes a debt that consumes or diminishes the minimum amount, which is nisab, in his possession, then there is no zakat due upon this person. Meaning, if for example you have 100,000 pounds, are you above nisab? 100% yes. So under normal circumstances, you are a person who should be paying zakat. But you owe 100,000 pounds. So you have 100,000 pounds, you minus 100,000 pounds which you owe, so what are you left with? You are left with nothing. So in this case, do you pay zakat, yes or no? Do we say no, don't worry about those debts. You have 100,000 right now, you need to pay zakat on it. Do we say that? According to the Hanbali madhab, we don't say that. Because the man who has debts in reality is not a rich man. So we would take 100,000, we would minus the 100,000 which you owe, we minus your debts. What are you left with? You are left with zero. It is below nisab, so there is no zakat upon you. Walhamdulillah. What happens if you have 100,000 and you owe 200,000? Obviously, in this case scenario, you have no nisab. In fact, you have absolutely nothing. You are in debt and you can collect zakah based upon certain conditions which we might mention later. In that case also, there is no zakat upon you. What happens if you have 100,000 pounds and you owe 10,000 pounds? Do we minus the debt? Yes, we do minus the debt according to the madhab. So you would pay zakat on 90,000 pounds and not 100,000 pounds. This mas'ala also with regards to minusing of the debts, we saw the opinion of the madhab, but as for the other madhahib, we find a lot of differences amongst them. And you find that majority of the scholars are of the opinion that you do minus your debts. That's the opinion of the Hanbalis, the opinion of the Hanafis, and many others, that you do minus your debts. And their opinion is based upon the fact that the person who owes money, in reality this is not a rich man. And also they state that if you want to collect zakat from him, it is much more important that he settles his debts before him giving to the poor. Him settling his debts is of a higher matter of importance than him giving zakat to the poor. Also this man, as we said, he is poor himself, he has these debts. Also we find in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, Uthman radiallahu ta'ala an, he stood on the mimbar and he mentioned to the people, it is the month of Ramadan, it's your month of zakah. So check up whatever you have, minus your debts, and then pay zakat on whatever remains. Denoting minusing of the debts. Also, we had mentioned previously in our first lesson in the chapter of zakah that you need to have, proper authority over this wealth. You need to have mulk at-tam, proper possession of this wealth. But the person who has 100,000 and he owes 100,000, does he really have proper possession of that wealth? No, his possession is deficient because that 100,000 belongs to the people that he owes this money to. If you have 100,000 and you owe 10,000, then that 10,000 in reality is not really your wealth. It belongs to someone else. Jayyid. So you would minus it from your zakah calculation, and the person that you owe it to, he would add it in his zakah calculation as an asset. So for you it's a liability, for him it's an asset, and zakat on that wealth applies only one time. You would not pay zakat on that wealth, 10,000, and Brother Sulaiman, because you owe him the 10,000, he would add it in his zakah calculation and he would pay the zakah on it, walhamdulillah. So the opinion of majority of the scholars is that we minus up our debts. Second opinion, and that's the opinion of the Maliki scholars, that we minus debts which are batin, and we do not minus debts which are zahir. What does this mean? Amwal al-zahira. Amwal al-zahira means wealth which you can see, and they included within this category that the cattle, the sheep, the cattle, the cows, the camels, also the crops. They said this type of wealth is wealth which everyone can see. And if you have debts with regards to these, then you don't minus. You don't say, well, for example, you know what, I have 500 camels and I owe someone so many camels, etc. So I minus and this, and we do that. No. Why? They said because amwal al-zahira, the poor, they look at this. Their heart gets attached to it. And when you say, no, well, I'm minusing my debts, and you're still keeping it and keeping it and keeping it, then they said this will cause, harm and cause hurt and pain in the hearts of the poor. As for amwal al-batina, which they meant by gold and silver and your currencies, they said yes, in this category you minus your debts, because the poor man, he doesn't really see all of this wealth. You keep it under your pillow, you keep it under your bed, you keep it very, very safe. So that was the distinction and classification of the Maliki scholars. They said that when the su'at would be sent out, the people who go and collect zakat, when they came to the farmer, when they came to the person who had crops and the person who had cattle, you don't have any incident that the person who had the cattle said, well, you know what, I can't give you any zakat this year. I'm supposed to pay, yes, this amount, but I owe debts. I owe this person and that person, so I can't give you any sheep this year. Never happened. They also stated that when Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala and fought the people who were not paying the zakah, we don't find any instance of him asking them, well, you know what, how much of sheep, etc. do you owe as debts or cattle? No, we don't find any narration about that matter. And the third opinion is that we do not minus debts at all. Why? Because zakah is due on that wealth. And right now, who told you not to settle your debts? It's the first of Ramadan, for example. If you have chosen that as your date, for paying your zakah, first of Ramadan. If before the first of Ramadan you settle your debts, fantastic. If you owed 10,000, then you gave someone 10,000, so now you only have 90,000 left, you pay zakah on 90,000. But if on the first of Ramadan, which is your date, you have 100,000 with you, then 100,000 pounds that you have with you is zakatable. We're not worried about the debts that you have. And this opinion is the opinion of the Shafi'i scholars, also the opinion of Sheikh bin Baz and Sheikh Uthaymeen. They said you do not minus debts. Zakah is due on that wealth, on that day, on today, on the 1st of Ramadan, you have this wealth. On the 15th of this month, you have this wealth. That's your date. You need to pay zakat on that, and it's the haqq of the poor. As for your debt, that's between you and the person that you owe. You need to find some way to pay that person, but you do not run down the poor in this matter. Strongest opinion and the opinion of the madhab in this matter is that we do minus debts. Walhamdulillah. We will leave you with a few matters to think about, and these take us into the intricacies of debts. What happens if we have debt which is due for many years from now? A person has bought a house on installment payment over 20 years, and he's purchased this house for 1 million pounds. Does he minus 1 million pounds every year when he is calculating his zakah? Eventually he's going to pay 1 million. But that's only after 20 years. Does he minus in his zakah calculation, I owe 1 million every year? If he did so, technically, 75% or 85% of the Muslims on this earth would not be paying zakah. If they were minusing the entire debt, which is long-term debt, then people wouldn't be paying zakat any longer every single year, because almost every single person has debt and they have long-term debt, and it's a massive amount, and it is even more than whatever assets they have on any one given year. Many contemporary scholars are of the opinion that what you do minus is the installments which are due for that year, and not the installments for 20 years, but rather installments for that 1 year. That's what you minus. So if in this year it was due from me, let's say for example 50,000, so in your zakat calculation you minus 50,000 due for that year and not for the other 19 years. And that's a very strong opinion of the contemporary scholars.